For years, maybe 6, maybe 10, the forest had been the only world Thomas knew. In the deep wilds of Upper Canada, time didn't pass, so much as dissolve. Seasons changed, rivers froze and thawed, and he followed the same rhythm, day after day. Hunt what he needed, split fallen logs, tend the small vegetable patch beside his crooked cabin. Life had shrunk to a cycle he didn't question, a loop he barely noticed. He hadn't meant to disappear from the world. He just hadn't found a reason to return to it. The mornings were always the same. He rose before dawn, drank boiled river water, and stepped outside to the crisp bite of the northern air. Birds scattered, trees stood like silent witnesses. He moved through his routines with practiced ease. No surprises, no emotions, just quiet. And one afternoon, as he was settling a snare line near the ridge, he heard a sound that didn't belong, a rising metallic roar. He froze and looked up. A plane, small, silver, and trembling, cut across the sky in a low, broken arc. Smoke trailed behind it. The engines coughed, choked, and then the aircraft dipped sharply toward the distant tree line. "No," Thomas whispered, helpless as it vanished with a violent flash of movement and a sound like the earth itself groaning. The crash. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Thomas didn't hesitate. Instinct, the old instinct he thought he buried, took hold. He sprinted through the trees, leaping roots, ducking branches, ignoring the string of cold air ripping through his lungs. It took nearly an hour to reach the wreckage. He smelled the fire before he saw it. Pieces of metal lay scattered across the forest floor, steaming in the snow. Flames crackled weakly. The cabin was torn open like a crushed can. He forced himself to walk through the debris, checking every twisted seat, every still shape. No survivors, except a small sound, a whimper. Thomas spun and saw a little girl wedged between two seats, her arm trapped beneath a section of fuselage. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, her eyes glassy with shock. "Hey," he said, kneeling beside her, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "I'm here. I've got you." She blinked at him, as if unsure he was real. He cleared debris piece by piece, careful not to jostle her too quickly. When she was free, he wrapped her in his coat and carried her through the cold, back toward his cabin. She was light, too light, just like... He shut the memory down before it finished forming. For 2 days, the girl drifted in and out of sleep on the cot near Thomas's fire. Her arm was badly bruised, her ankle swollen, and she had a deep cut along her thigh. She barely spoke at first, and Thomas didn't push. He didn't have a radio, no signal, no phone, no way to call anyone, but by walking for days toward the nearest logging camp. But the girl needed stabilizing before any journey, so he kept her warm, fed her broth slowly, and watched her breathing as if the rhythm anchored him. On the third morning, she sat up weakly. Where's my mom?" she asked. Thomas felt something inside him collapse in on itself. He sat at the edge of the cot. "I need to tell you the truth, sweetheart. The plane crash. Your parents." "I know," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "Before the plane, my dad put me in my seat and buckled me fast. My mom, she helped. They were still standing up when everything shook." Tears welled in her eyes, her small body trembling. Thomas hadn't cried in years, but his throat burned. "What's your name, love?" he asked gently. "Lila." He nodded. "That's a beautiful name." She glanced around the small cabin. "Are you all alone out here?" "Yes," Thomas said. Then after a moment, "I chose to be." "Why?" He should have expected the question, but it struck him like an arrow. He turned to the window, unable to face her for a second. Snow drifted against the glass, soft and relentless. "I had a daughter," he said finally. "Her name was Claire. She was about your age." Lila watched him silently. "She got very sick," Thomas continued. "The kind of sickness that doctors couldn't fix. I tried everything, every treatment, every prayer. Nothing worked." His voice cracked despite himself. "When she died, I didn't know how to live in the world anymore. So I left it." Lila's eyes softened with an understanding far too old for her small face. "You miss her," she said. "Every day," Thomas whispered. She reached out slowly, placing her small hand over his. The touch was simple, but it shattered him, not in a painful way, but in a way that felt like thawing. In the days that followed, Lila grew stronger. She helped Thomas feed the chickens, asked endless questions about the forest, and insisted on helping him chop wood. though she could barely lift kindling. The cabin, once silent as a tomb, now echoed with laughter, small footsteps, and the noise of a life Thomas had forgotten. He could feel. One evening, as they ate stew together, she asked, "Will you take me home now?" Thomas's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. He'd known this moment would come. "Yes," he said softly, "as soon as you're ready." Lila nodded solemnly. "I'm ready now." Thomas felt something tighten behind his ribs. He wasn't ready. The forest had become his shield, his hiding place, going back and facing a world he'd abandoned, and the pain he'd refused to heal. But Lila was watching him with those steady eyes. "You'll come with me, right?" she asked. "You won't leave me alone?" He swallowed hard. "I won't leave you." And for the first time in years, he meant it. They packed what they needed: food, blankets, the strongest pair of snow boots Thomas owned. He strapped a pack onto Lila's back and another onto his own. The nearest outpost was 2 days away, if the weather held. More if it didn't. Before they left, Thomas paused at the doorway of the cabin. His home, his retreat, his prison. He ran his hand along the frame one last time. "You okay?" Lila asked softly. Thomas looked down at her, the winter sun catching in her hair. "I think," he said slowly, "that I'm more okay than I've been in a long time." They began walking. The forest was quiet, but it no longer felt lonely. Lila stepped carefully beside him, occasionally slipping her hand into his for balance. He taught her how to read the trees, how to follow tracks in the snow, how to listen for distant water beneath the ice. At night, they camped under a tarp, curled close to the fire. Lila slept with her head against his arm, trusting him completely. The warmth of that trust softened something tightly, knotted inside him. On the second morning, the smoke trail of a distant chimney appeared between the trees. Civilization, a world he left behind, and a world Lila needed. A world he suddenly realized he wanted to face again. As they approached the outpost, Lila squeezed his hand. "Thomas," she said. "Yes? You're not going to disappear again, right?" He knelt in front of her, so they were eye to eye. "No," he said firmly. "I think I've disappeared enough for one lifetime." Lila nodded and hugged him, small, fierce, full of life. Something inside him settled, a bridge built between grief and healing. They continued toward the small wooden station where help waited. Help for Lila, and maybe, somewhere down the road, help for him too. And as Thomas stepped out of the forest for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't leaving something behind. He was finally returning.
This heart is still beating. Just got to breathe in